Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to today's Discovery Series webinar. It did start a little early, so I'll give people time to join, and I'll get my screen situated in the meantime. I hope everybody's having a fantastic Thursday today. Really excited to be talking with you about our report template library. After I give people a minute to join, we'll jump into it. We have a lot to go through in the next 30 minutes or so. During the webinar today, please feel free to utilize the Q&A and chat if you have any questions. I'll do my best to monitor everything during the session today, answer any questions that I can. If not, we can certainly follow up. There'll also be a QR code that I'll show at the end of the webinar that you can use to schedule time to meet with me or the rest of our team. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and let's get started. So today you are joining a fantastic webinar. We are going to be talking about the report template library within Motivity. For those that are new to Motivity, I will quickly introduce Motivity. We are the first all-in-one intervention management platform for ABA and multidisciplinary organizations. We cover all of your needs from scheduling to billing, and we really are a one-stop shop when it comes to having everything you need in a central location for your practice. We today are going to be focusing on documentation, specifically clinical documentation. I did notice we've been doing the Discovery series for a few weeks now, and this one was one of the webinars that we saw maybe the most registrants. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk through today, I wanted to talk about as a clinician, why reports and making them easier and faster is such an important topic within our field. And before I get into that, I want to highlight that, as I mentioned, Motivity is the first clinical first all-in-one solution. But I also want to highlight that we are a team of clinicians and other subject matter experts. Across our team, we have BCBAs, and then in our operations team, we have subject matter experts who have interacted with the system or other systems. And that's exactly how we build features into Motivity. We look at what the field needs, and that's how we drive our roadmap. And you'll see that firsthand as I walk through the webinar today. That leads very well into a quick introduction for myself. My name is Catherine Martin. As I mentioned, I am a BCBA and an enablement lead with Motivity. I saw one of my colleagues also just added a little bit about themselves. So beyond being a BCBA and maybe outside of work, I absolutely love to ski. And I am mom to a 1-year-old little boy who at some point you might hear screaming at my door. As I mentioned, I wanted to think about why I felt this was such an important webinar and why did we see such an increase in registrants today. And like I said, I think a lot of that has to do with the desire to have a ability to write reports in a way that's more efficient, perhaps more accurate, and also based on what funders are requiring. And so I thought a lot about what was the impact I had and when I think about or consider report writing. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I experienced prior to Motivity and why that matters, not just for me, but for everybody in terms of thinking about report writing within Motivity. So, I'm sure people can resonate with some of the bullets that I put here, but why was report writing so aversive to me? And some of the things that came to mind are working nights and weekends to finish documentation. So, oftentimes, I didn't feel like I could do it during the workday because if I was working on a report, but I needed to step away to move into a different clinic room to provide support for a staff, maybe I had 15 minutes between sessions, and so I wanted to get a few things done, but again, it was always going to be a quick transition. Sometimes if my system logged me out, if my computer just went to sleep, for example, there's a couple things that might happen when I step away from my computer, and all of the work that I had done would be lost if I had forgot to hit save or I kind of rushed away from my computer, not anticipating or not knowing when I would return. And again, I was losing work that I was doing if I could only do it in these shorter periods of time. It was difficult to try to work on it in a way that was meaningful if I couldn't dedicate all of my attention for an extended period of time to it. And so that became really difficult to do unless I was working nights and weekends, which is not ideal. It's not fun to work a full-time job and then also work outside of those hours, especially if your reports and your authorizations don't line up, then that would mean very consistently having to spend a lot of time outside of working hours finishing up documentation. The second one I just briefly mentioned kind of goes along together, but rewriting sections. So I would work on a report. If the system crashed, I would lose everything I was working on, and then having to go back and try to remember it to the best of my ability, or maybe just stepping away because I needed to take a break after feeling like I had just lost so much of my time trying to finish a report and losing all of the work I had done. Struggling to generate accurate graphs, and so a lot of the manual work or why were reports taking me so long, I found was often having to go in and try to adjust my graphs in a way that was meaningful, in a way that would represent progress, and having to do that one by one, or just the system maybe defaulting a setting I was trying to do to one graph to all of my graphs, which would then skew those graphs. So that became really difficult. Manually calculating progress and averages. So having to go back into raw data and identify what my client's current average was for some of the goals that were in progress. Re-entering client demographic data. I'm sure many are familiar with trying to either have a split screen or two screens open where you're looking at an old report and you're filling in information that is exactly the same for this new report, but having to go through and enter it one by one. Delaying report generation. So because my graphs were not updating, I would try to make sure I was only pulling my report to the very close as I could to when I was going to resubmit, because I wanted to make sure I had as much data and as much up-to-date data in the report as possible. And because I was doing a lot of things in separate systems to avoid losing work from system crashes, it was just easier to do what I was working on in a separate system and then copy and paste only right before I was actually submitting the report. And then finally, and most importantly, again, when asked the question, why was report writing so aversive and why did it take so long? When I think about why it was so aversive, I think this last bullet really rang true, which was I was spending more time writing the report than I was on client-facing assessments, both in terms of the authorized hours and the billable hours that I was utilizing, and then of course what was non-billable. Far more of my time was spent on writing reports and trying to make all of these manual adjustments and fixes I just mentioned than it was actually client facing and completing the assessments that were necessary. That felt like there needed to be a change because I was sacrificing clinical work for documentation, and I knew there had to be a better solution. So, looking at those bullets, the challenges that I were facing, excessive administration time. What you'll see in our solution, and I'm going to go through in our product demonstration in a moment here, is streamlined workflows and extensive import options to reduce documentation time. So, rather than how do I save all of this excessive time I'm spending with maybe just manual data entry over and over, you'll see in Motivity extensive import options to reduce the amount of time you're spending on documentation. Time lost to duplicated work. If the system crashed and I had to try to retype to the best of my ability, Motivity has an automatic save as you go and 99.9% uptime to prevent any sort of data loss, including clinical documentation. So as I work on reports in Motivity, even if I only have those 15 minutes to work on a document, I can go in, capture what I need in that time frame, and dock my report to the side and continue doing whatever I'm doing, or walk away from my computer. Even if my computer loses battery, blows up, whatever happens, what I have entered into the system is going to be saved there the next time I log in. System limitation. So if I wasn't able to configure my graphs in the way that I needed, spending all of that manual adjustments, so you can actually edit the graphs right within Motivity, as well as look at our save and hide feature if there's certain graphs that you don't want to make visible. Again, extended report writing time. We have automatic calculations within the system where I'm able to, oh, excuse me, extended report writing time. We want to focus on our clone feature. So within our ability to clone, you can make sure that data is carried from an existing report, especially for, like I said, those sections where you're writing very similar or almost identical information. Their school schedule maybe has not changed from the first authorization to the second. Finally, when we think about waiting till the last minute to submit, report, the challenge or the risk is that we might have a service lapse. If I wait too long and I actually let the authorization lapse, we're going to see a disruption in services. And so Motivity's reports are dynamic, meaning I can actually set a future date and my graphs will continue to update based on that date range that I'm pulling, allowing me to start my authorization or my reauth treatment plan much earlier in that authorization period. Manual data entry across systems, we have the ability to automatically calculate averages for you. You can view this in your graphs, and that also is going to tie directly into your reports. And then finally, inadequate assessment time. So we're going to cut report writing time down by 50% is what our data is showing us. Based on the data that we've pulled and the technicians and clinicians that we've worked with, we have been able to reduce report writing time by 50%, which was our goal when we came out with our report templates. And so that is ultimately going to give me and other clinicians more time back with clients that we're working with. I wanted to have this direct comparison because, as I mentioned, when I thought about my challenges, I'm sure a lot of these ring true to those clinicians or even operation team members on the call that are hearing that feedback from their clinical team. And that's what you'll see in terms of not just reports within Motivity, but any of our features. We look at challenges that those in the field are facing, and we exactly design a solution that's going to solve for those problems. What today we're going to do is focus on our report templates, and we'll talk a little bit about our library. There's a few screenshots I have here to orient everybody into what we're going to be going through. So when you're in an organization within Motivity in the organization settings, you see a note template and report template library. This is similar to our program libraries where you can really easily see things organized in the way that you need. Now we have that for our note templates and reports as well, so that organizations can very quickly access materials that they need in a very systematic workflow. Once you select the note template library, we have two options. We are going to provide organizations default examples. So we're going to start you right off with the templates that we expect most organizations are going to utilize, as well as your ability to utilize and edit your own. So you're not going to be only able to use our defaults. We want to provide a great starting point, and then from there you can build the ones that are specific to your organization and your needs. If you were to collect or select Motivity's featured libraries, that will then break down two options. We have our ABA payer notes and then general notes and forms. So we want to provide you with is not just report templates and reauthorization, although I know we talked a lot about that. We tend to be the one that takes the most amount of time. But when we think about documentation within Motivity, we want to provide you everything you might need for the life cycle of your learners. So we're going to focus on those ABA payer templates. Those are going to be your session notes and your reports, but we also want to make sure that we included options for things like caregiver summaries. We provide those to a lot of the schools that we work with to make sure that they're able to, if they want, have caregiver summaries that they can communicate between the school and caregivers, incident reports, client body checks, consent forms, anything that might be relevant that a client might need within their documentation, being able to access it within the system. Once you click into any of these uh, templates that we have here, you can of course edit them further. This next screenshot shows you some of the ways that you can edit reports on Motivity. And what I want to highlight is your ability to turn this. Here you can see all of the different format options. We wanted this to be based on, again, what your funders maybe require, and maybe just also your preference and how you prefer to organize information within your templates. So if we think about how you can build on Motivity or edit some of our existing, we're going to give you all of the options you need based on your formatted preferences. But to save time, we're also going to give you options for importable fields. Within Motivity, we have 4 sections of importable fields. If you select those, you'll see a much more extensive list of everything that you can import. And so what that does is you build this infrastructure that allows you to create a template that then has all of these fields that are importable. What you're looking at now is a simulated view of a template. What I can see is all of the components in black that I want included in my template, and everything highlighted in blue here is in an importable field. Gone are the days of having two screens open and going back and forth and putting information that you're entering into every report, but instead having it simply import into the reports, the incident reports, the session notes, any document that might need it. You can quickly import information to save significant time and also making sure it's more accurate. It's very easy to select the wrong number when entering a date of birth when I'm having to do it manually and side by side. Oops. Okay. So what I want to go through now is actually looking at what this information presents on the system. And so I'm going to switch gears here off of our screenshots to actually walking through a product demonstration. Here you can see I'm at the organization level. So within an organization, as I mentioned, we have both our program template library and our note template library. As we saw in that screenshot, I have options for my organization reports and then the Motivity featured libraries. When we click into the Motivity featured libraries, as we saw again, we can break it down into our payer notes and reports and then general forms. We'll quickly take a look at our general forms so you can see a couple examples that we have. All of these different labels that we add are just helpful ways for you to find information that you might need. So if I want to quickly identify a report based on the labels, I can do so. If I instead want to just be able to flag for my team the information relevant into the report, I can do that as well. As with all of our libraries, anytime I select one of these forms that I'm interested in viewing, I get to see a simulated view. This is incredibly helpful, both for operation team members who maybe want to see currently what their reports or documents, the information they have. But I know for me, from the clinician perspective, even on that kind of one-to-one, it's also nice to be able to see what's included within a report before I select it. Make sure I'm selecting the most up-to-date one or the one that I need that's relevant to the document that I'm trying to generate. So rather than pulling it and then deleting it if it's incorrect and then trying to find the right one, I can very systematically select the report that's relevant to me, verify that that's the information I want, and then be able to add it to the learner that I'm working with. So in my simulated view, what this shows me is what's included, and I can see all of the um, imported fields within this document here. And you can see it's incredibly extensive because that's going to be a huge time saver. In this case, we're looking at a BIP, but especially something like an incident report, we want as much as we can imported because you want to be able to generate those quickly. What's really helpful is you see two things within these reports. The first is the title. So this is what's going to be visible. And then in that bolded blue, it's showing you what information is exactly imported. So there's no guessing game to identify where is this information pulling from. You know exactly where that's coming from, and I'll show you that in a minute. The second library we have here is our ABA payer and note template. As we scroll through here, and as I mentioned before, this is really focusing on those session notes and those different treatment plans, both initial discharge and reauthorization, to provide you what you're going to need to get started. When I actually pull one for a learner, we'll be focusing on a reauthorization, so I'll open a session note to show you what that looks like as well. Here you'll be able to see we have a different description, but again, all of that bold blue is highlighting all of the information that we can make importable to save your team time, including the raw data importing directly into all of your session notes and then your graphs for your reports. From an administrative perspective, having this library to store the information you need allows you to quickly see if your forms are up to date, if there's edits you want to make to them, and then also important to note is who can access reports within Motivity. We have the ability to set different users and permission levels, which allows you to make sure that only the people that you need to can see the reports that are relevant to them. If we think about DTs or RBTs, you're only going to want them to see specific session note types and maybe incident reports and documents like that. And so you can control that within the system. You could also have reports that maybe you're in the process of drafting, and same thing, you make sure that that is not visible to your team. And so they only see the reports and documents that are active and are applicable to the notes that they should be filling out. So from an administrative perspective, you can see everything you need while still having great control and safeguards in place that only the relevant people see the documents that they need to access. It did look like we had a question, so I'll pop that up. Oh, I am so sorry. There was two questions right back to back. For the sake of time, what I'm going to do is move forward with the product demonstration, and then we can circle back to those questions, of course. In my other tab here, instead of being at the organizational level, I'm looking at a specific learner. So here we see a learner that we're working with. Motivity has what we call a timeline and report. In our timeline and report, you can think of that as a history for the learner. So that's going to be any session data, any events that might have been noted, videos that were captured, and of course, any clinical documents. The way that we can store information is we have completed, so we're going to show in reverse chronological order here. Anything, however, that is in progress is going to float right to that top. So as I mentioned, if I'm working on a report and I've got 15 minutes, but then I'm going into a session, I can still easily access that report and have it visible when I need to. Another incredible feature when we think about how BCBAs are functioning day to day, jumping between sessions, answering questions, even maybe in between those sessions, I can easily dock this to the side. And so I'm still able to access it, but I could also go into other sections of the system and have it visible for me there. So if I need to answer a question or I want to look at progress for one of my programs, but I still want to keep that report open, I certainly can do that, which is really nice. As I mentioned, when we think about how we want to save clinicians' times, of course, that import tool is really important, but also the ability to clone. So if I'm coming in and I'm working on a new plan for one of my um, clients, I have two options. I can either clone an existing note. So this one's in progress. I can also clone a note that's been completed, and that'll help me save time. As I mentioned, the importable fields will be there, but perhaps sections where it's asking about coordination of care and I have to enter the other services they receive when they're in school, if that's a barrier to the number of hours that we can schedule them per day, things like that that have not changed from my first to my second authorization. Cloning this report allows me to go in and save time. What's also really incredible is when I clone my report, it's of course going to look at the new data that's been added based on the time frame. So when I clone my report, I do need to specify my start and end date, and my graphs are going to generate based on that date. So everything's going to be up to date. Of course, you're going to want to go in and do spot checks for different sections and fill out your proposed goals in a way that are for this new authorization, but it's going to significantly save you time by not having to copy and paste those sections that we know are often very redundant and often very similar from one auth to the next. However, if instead we want to pull a whole new authorization or a whole new report, we can do so right from here. So I select plus note, I identify the report I want to work with, and same thing, I enter my time frame. In this case, we'll go a few months back, and I'll also go a month or two in the future. We'll go to February. Because maybe I'm working on this early because I know as my staff continues to collect data, all of that will update into my graph. Once I create this note, a few things that I want to point out. The first is that you can, of course, add your company's logo here. And then we see all of these sections that have been imported. So we saw those headers, and then in this case, we're seeing all these importable fields right within the report. If we look at this background section, I've made that importable as well. And so you might be thinking, where is this information coming from? What we often hear from organizations making a transition to Motivity is they felt that they didn't use the full components of maybe their existing system because there was uncertainty on how that worked. And so we make that really transparent within Motivity. Every learner has a profile. If we look at my learner's profile here, we can see information that we're looking at, including this background section. I'm going to go back into the report that we were just working on, and I'm going to dock it to the side. Once I dock it to my screen, I can now look at my learner's profile, and perhaps I need to make an edit. So when I go here, I look at my background section, and I realize that perhaps an age or a date is inaccurate. So I maybe want to add, she has two younger twin sisters who both live at home. Maybe we've been asked to include the age. So I'll say two younger sisters. Oops, I have to edit this. Age 3. I think Merida in this case is 4. And as soon as I update that in the background, it updates into my report. As I mentioned, these are dynamic reports. If you make an update into your learner's profile or an importable field, it will directly update in your report rather than needing to regenerate anything. The other thing I can do is if I know I've made that adjustment and now want to start to work on this full screen, I can simply select this button. What we want you to be able to do is have it as part of your screen if you need to be working on other things or maybe you're looking for information in the system, but of course making it larger for you for the ease of actually working through it. While we're in this report, we'll look through a few more things when we think about how to save time in the system. One of those options is also the show hide feature that we have right at the top here. That's going to allow me to hide different sections of my report if they aren't relevant. As I'm scrolling through here, again, we're seeing a lot of this imported information and then different sections that I might go in and fill out. Text boxes, footers to guide staff on what to complete, and different drop downs to make it easy for me to fill out information. The first section I want to spend time in is this behavior reduction section here. When you import graphs into the system, you can import by behavior reduction versus skill acquisition, and then mastered if you want to include a section. And then you can organize by domain, which allows you to, one, flag the domain for funders to be able to see what's medically necessary in terms of the goals you're targeting, and two, just having it really organized in the goals that you're looking at so a funder, again, can really easily read the types of things that you're targeting for this learner. On the side here is showing me options where I could hide different sections of the report. In this case, I want them all visible, so I'm going to leave those on. And I can go in and shut this off, but we'll talk about it a little bit further on. What you'll notice when we get to this section is the amount of data that has just been imported. So aside from demographic information, I can also import, in this case, my target, my short-term goal, my date of intervention, and then of course the graph we're looking at here. As I talked about earlier, the graphs are editable even within the report. So if I see the average that it's calculating, and this is looking at rate per hour, but maybe I want to focus on per day since that's how I reported on this graph, I can actually just adjust this right within my report. It will adjust my graph and it also updated my average. So I know my funders are getting exactly what they need and I'm reporting on my goal very specifically so that it's easy to see the progress or lack of progress a learner is making at any given time. You'll also notice I've included my trend line, and I could go in and adjust my date range right within here as well if I needed or wanted. As we look at other options, we're going to see very similar information. My short-term goal, my date of intervention, the average that we're looking at. I can also change how I group my data. So again, if I'm reporting on this goal based on per day, maybe I want to start to look at my graph grouped in that way because it's relevant to how we're looking at our goal. If I wanted to include an import sections on the protocol, what's my behavior intervention plan, those are all sections that we can include as well for ease and to avoid you having to put information, the same information, in multiple components of the system. When we look at something like your skills-based assessment, another huge time saver is the ability to include fields that are text only. So for those administrators on the call that are part of setting up your template, maybe you use different assessments like your VB map, the ABLES, Early Start Denver model, whatever it might be, and you want to be able to include a snapshot so that funders can see what the assessment is that's being utilized rather than your clinicians needing to go in and describe what the assessment is over and over. Instead, you can just make something like a drop down. So if they use the VB map, I'm able to see that description. Alternatively, if I use the ABLES, it'll update the description accordingly. So again, something that maybe seems small, but ends up being a huge time saver and something that ends up feeling a little bit repetitive when we think about report writing. Now, for the sake of time, we're not going to fill out all of these other sections that we see here in the other text boxes to include. So what I want to jump down is to this other section where I'm going to import graphs. As I mentioned, I have the ability to show and hide different sections of my report. In this case, maybe the goal for answering what questions I want to see is it make sense for me to show a cumulative graph? So I can make this visible. I can quickly see that it looks like we haven't mastered any targets within this time frame, so I could hide it. Before I do that, I want to show you though the options when I pull a cumulative graph within the system. I can actually identify any of the phases that I want to include within here. Most funders, if they're looking for a different report or graph other than your target graph, they're going to be looking at a cumulative graph, and so you want to include completed or maintained. But if you wanted to, you can do that right within the report. It's also just nice to be able to quickly see. In this case, it's not going to be relevant information to report on. So I'm going to hide this and I'm going to focus on my target charts. And I simply just make those visible right within the report. When you build your template, you can determine if you want graphs to default show or hide. This is a great example of one I might want to hide. And so we haven't captured a lot of data. Maybe we'll be working on it during the next authorization as well. So rather than show one data point, I'm simply going to hide this and I'm going to focus on the ones that we have visible here. Okay. We went through a lot today, but what I hope you gathered is how the system is designed to save you time. As I mentioned, whether you're a clinician on this call that can resonate with what I mentioned earlier about why report writing is taking you so long, you can see exactly how we've built the reports to save and address each of those different features. And then from an administrative standpoint, how do you help save your clinicians time and reduce administrative overhead by giving them tools that make report writing easier and faster for them? The last thing I'll show here is how you can access support. In addition to our dedicated support team that you'll have access to, we also have these video courses and knowledge base. Some of my favorite are these video courses where we actually have them specifically designed for our reports because we know that's where clinicians are spending a lot of their time. We have a few options. Here you can see reports for administrators. That's going to help guide how to make edits to templates, how to move things around within templates, and then reports for clinicians, where it's going to help show your staff exactly how to use these tools to save them time. We want you to be able to get the best and most use out of the system, and so we're going to put those tools in your hands. And like I said, we also have your support team you can access. And you might have noticed this customer education event where we do hold different masterclass options. We went over the reports recently, which was an exciting one as well. Before I stop sharing my screen, I want to do quickly go back to that QR code. Please, please, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, if you want to meet with our team about our reporting tools or any other offerings we have at Motivity. We'd love to talk with you and see where we might be able to support. I'll stick around for a moment to see if there's any questions that might need to be answered, but I really hope everybody enjoyed their time today. And thanks for sitting with Motivity on Thursday. Bye, everyone.